two small voices whispering from beneath a dining table were all it took to bring a self-made millionaire to his knees. Marcus Chen, a man who had built a tech consulting empire through calculated decisions and unwavering control, found himself paralyzed by fear when his 6-year-old twins refused to come out, their eyes filled with terror he'd never seen before. Why would two children who had everything, a mansion, the best schools, every toy imaginable, be hiding in the dark, trembling at the sound of footsteps? The answer lay buried in a tragedy Marcus thought he'd moved past, a loss he'd tried to fix with money and logic, and a terrible mistake that was about to surface in the most devastating way possible. The skyline of Clearwater City glittered like scattered diamonds against the Pacific horizon, and nowhere was that view more spectacular than from the penthouse office of Chen Dynamics on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower. Marcus Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone pressed to his ear, negotiating a 7-figure contract with the casual confidence of a man who'd done it 1,000 times before. At 41, Marcus was the embodiment of the American dream reimagined through an immigrant lens. His parents had arrived from Taiwan with 2 suitcases and unshakable faith in education. His father had worked as a janitor while studying at night. His mother had cleaned houses while raising Marcus and his younger sister in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in the Riverside district. Marcus had watched his parents sacrifice everything, and he'd made a silent vow: he would never struggle the way they had. He would never watch his children wear second-hand clothes or worry about whether the electricity would be shut off. And he'd kept that promise. Chen Dynamics specialized in enterprise resource planning and digital transformation consulting. Marcus had started the company in a converted garage 12 years ago with $15,000 in savings and an idea that most investors called ambitious to the point of delusional. Now, the firm employed over 200 people, maintained offices in 3 cities, and consulted for some of the biggest names in manufacturing, healthcare, and finance. His net worth had crossed $50 million last year. Forbes had featured him in their 40 Under 40 issue. Governor Richardson had personally invited him to the State Business Council. He sat on the boards of 2 nonprofits and was being courted by venture capital firms to launch a tech incubator. Success had a taste, Marcus thought, and it was intoxicating. But it had also come at a price he was only beginning to understand. The ghost in the mansion. The Chen residence sat on 2 acres in Riverside Heights, the most exclusive neighborhood in Clearwater City. The house itself was a modern architectural marvel, all clean lines, glass walls, and sustainable materials that had won awards from design magazines. It had 7 bedrooms, a home theater, an infinity pool that seemed to spill into the sky, and a wine cellar that Marcus never used because he rarely drank. The house was a statement. A monument. A middle finger to every landlord who'd ever threatened his family with eviction. But it was also, if Marcus was honest with himself in the rare quiet moments, desperately empty. 3 years ago, this house had been filled with life. His wife, Sophie Chen, had transformed every sterile designer space into something warm. She'd insisted on plants everywhere. A house needs to breathe, Marcus, and had covered the refrigerator with the twins' artwork. She'd played music while cooking, danced in the kitchen, left her reading glasses on every surface, and made the cavernous spaces feel like a home rather than a showroom. Sophie had been a high school art teacher when they met. Marcus was already building Chen Dynamics, already consumed by 90-hour work weeks, already becoming the man who lived at the office. She'd understood him in ways no one else did. She never resented his ambition because she had her own, to raise children who were kind, creative, and unafraid to be themselves. Their twins, Lily and Ethan, had been born after 3 years of fertility treatments. Sophie had carried them despite complications, despite bed rest, despite warnings from doctors. When they finally arrived, 2 perfect, screaming miracles, Sophie had cried for an hour straight, holding one in each arm. "We made them," she'd whispered to Marcus, her face radiant despite the exhaustion. "We made these beautiful humans." The twins were 3 years old when Sophie collapsed during a parent-teacher conference at Riverside Elementary. A ruptured brain aneurysm, the doctors said. Catastrophic and unsurvivable. She was gone within 4 hours. Before Marcus could even get to the hospital, before he could tell her one last time that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. The funeral had been a blur. Marcus remembered very little of it, just the weight of two small hands clutching his pant legs, two confused faces looking up at him, asking when Mommy would wake up. He tried to explain death to 3-year-olds and realized how utterly inadequate words were. In the aftermath, Marcus had done what he always did when faced with an impossible problem. He tried to engineer a solution. He couldn't bring Sophie back, but he could make sure the twins had everything they needed. The best pediatricians. Child psychologists specializing in grief. Top-tier preschool programs. A rotation of nannies, housekeepers, and tutors who would provide structure and care. He'd increased his life insurance. Set up trust funds. Hired a financial planner to ensure the twins would never want for anything, even if something happened to him. What he hadn't done was stop working. If anything, he'd worked more. Because work was logical. Work had rules. Work didn't ask him to process emotions he didn't know how to feel. He told himself he was securing their future. He told himself that providing was the highest form of love. He told himself a lot of things that turned out to be lies. The revolving door. In 3 years, Marcus had employed 7 nannies. The first, Mrs. Patricia Gomez, had lasted 4 months before quitting, citing irreconcilable differences with the children's behavioral needs. The twins had been angry in those early days, angry at the world for taking their mother, angry at their father for being absent, angry at strangers who tried to take Sophie's place. The second nanny, a young woman named Jessica Tran, had made it 6 weeks before Marcus came home to find her crying in the kitchen. "I can't do this," she'd sobbed. "They don't listen. They don't eat. Lily keeps having these screaming nightmares, and Ethan won't talk. I'm not equipped for this." Numbers 3, 4, and 5 had similar experiences. The twins were labeled difficult, traumatized, in need of more specialized care. Marcus had tried therapy for them. Dr. Helena Marsh, a child psychologist with 30 years of experience, had met with Lily and Ethan weekly for 6 months. She'd used play therapy, art therapy, sand trays, and puppets. The twins had been cooperative but closed off, giving textbook answers that revealed nothing. "They're protecting themselves," Dr. Marsh had told Marcus during a parent consultation. "They've learned that adults leave. Their mother left, in their understanding. The nannies leave. And you, Mr. Chen, I say this with compassion, you're physically present but emotionally absent. They don't trust that anyone will stay." The words had stung because they were true. Nanny number 6, an older woman named Ruth Aberdeen, had seemed promising. She'd lasted 5 months and had actually connected with the twins. But then her husband had a stroke, and she'd had to move to Oregon to care for him. More abandonment. More proof that people leave. By the time Marcus posted the listing for nanny number 7, he'd been desperate. The agency had sent him a dozen candidates, but none had the right combination of experience, education, and patience required for high-needs children in a single-parent household. Then Victoria Ashford's resume had arrived. The answer to everything. Victoria Ashford was, on paper, exactly what Marcus needed. 52 years old. 23 years of experience with high-net-worth families in Manhattan, Boston, and San Francisco. Bachelor's degree in early childhood education from Barnard College. Certifications in child development, pediatric first aid, and childhood trauma response. Fluent in English, French, and Mandarin. Impeccable references from families Marcus had actually heard of, tech executives, hedge fund managers, a federal judge. Her interview had been impressive. She'd arrived at the Chen residence dressed conservatively in a navy suit, her steel gray hair pulled into an elegant chignon. She'd answered every question with calm professionalism, never flustered, never uncertain. "I understand that Lily and Ethan have experienced significant loss," she'd said, her hazel eyes direct and compassionate. "Children who've lost a parent need structure, consistency, and clear boundaries. They need to know that adults can be trusted to maintain order in a chaotic world. I can provide that." She'd met the twins briefly that day. They'd been wary, as they were with all strangers, but Victoria hadn't tried to force connection. She'd simply smiled warmly and said, "I look forward to getting to know you both." Marcus had hired her on the spot. For the first month, Victoria had been everything he'd hoped for. The household, which had felt like a war zone with the previous nannies, had transformed into something resembling peace. The twins stopped fighting bedtime. They ate balanced meals. They completed their homework without 3-hour battles. Their teachers at Riverside Prep Academy reported that both children seemed calmer, more focused. Marcus had felt an enormous weight lift from his shoulders. Finally, stability. Finally, someone who could handle the chaos while he handled the business. Victoria sent him daily updates via email, professional, detailed reports that he'd skim between meetings. "Mr. Chen, today we visited the Children's Museum. Lily showed particular interest in the art exhibit. Ethan enjoyed the dinosaur display. Both children were well-behaved and engaged. Dinner was salmon and vegetables, which they ate without complaint. Bedtime at 8 p.m., no issues. VC. Everything was always no issues. The twins were always well-behaved." It was as if Victoria had found some magic formula that had eluded 6 previous caregivers. Marcus never questioned it. He was relieved. Grateful. He increased Victoria's salary after 3 months as a gesture of appreciation. He never stopped to wonder why his children, who'd been so angry and resistant for years, had suddenly become so compliant. He never asked them directly how they felt about Victoria. He never noticed that when he came home, on the rare evenings he made it by dinner, the twins were quiet. Subdued. They answered his questions with yes or no, made eye contact when required, and then retreated to their rooms. He thought they were adjusting. Healing. Moving forward. He'd been catastrophically wrong. The night everything changed. October 24th started as an unremarkable Thursday. Marcus had been in back-to-back meetings all day, a morning session with a potential client in the pharmaceutical industry, lunch with his CFO to review quarterly projections, and an afternoon strategy session with his senior consultants. He was supposed to have dinner with Richard Blackwell, CEO of Titanium Industries, to discuss a possible partnership. It was the kind of meeting that could lead to an 8-figure contract. Marcus never missed these opportunities. But at 4:47 p.m., Richard's assistant called to reschedule. Richard had the flu and was going home early. For the first time in weeks, Marcus would be home before 7 p.m. He called Victoria to let her know, a courtesy he'd learned to extend after coming home unannounced once and startling everyone. The call went straight to voicemail. Odd, but not alarming. She was probably helping the twins with homework and had silenced her phone. Marcus left the office at 5:30, fighting rush-hour traffic through downtown Clearwater. The October sky was already darkening, the days getting shorter as winter approached. He listened to a business podcast during the drive, half his mind on the content, the other half mentally reviewing the Blackwell proposal. He pulled into his circular driveway at 6:15 p.m. The house was lit up, warm light glowing through the massive windows. From the outside, it looked like a magazine spread, the perfect American home. He used his key to enter through the front door, the security system chiming softly to announce his arrival. "Victoria," he called out, setting his briefcase on the marble console table. "Kids?" Silence. The house felt wrong immediately. Marcus couldn't pinpoint why, it was just an instinct, a prickling at the base of his skull that something was off. The kitchen was spotless, as always. Dinner was prepared on the stove, chicken stir-fry with vegetables, the twins' favorite. But the table wasn't set. The food was getting cold. "Lily? Ethan?" His voice echoed through the high-ceilinged space. He walked through the first floor, checking rooms systematically. The living room was empty, toys organized in perfect rows in the built-in shelving units. The family room was dark. His home office was undisturbed. The unease was growing into something closer to panic. He climbed the curved staircase to the second floor, taking the steps 2 at a time. Kids, this isn't funny. Where are you? Their bedrooms were empty. Beds made with military precision, stuffed animals arranged just so. Too perfect. Children's rooms shouldn't look like museum displays. The panic was building now, a pressure in his chest that made it hard to breathe. Where were they? Had Victoria taken them somewhere without telling him? Had something happened? He pulled out his phone to call Victoria again when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it. A whimper. It was coming from downstairs. Marcus ran back down the staircase, his heart hammering. He followed the sound to the formal dining room, a space they almost never used, reserved for the dinner parties Marcus never hosted. He pushed open the heavy oak doors. The dining room was dim, lit only by the fading twilight through the windows. The massive table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by 12 high-backed chairs. And beneath the table, pressed against the wall in the darkest corner, were his children. Both of them were huddled together, Ethan's thin arm wrapped protectively around Lily's shoulders. His daughter's face was streaked with tears that caught the dim light. His son's eyes were wide, glassy, fixed on the doorway with an expression Marcus had never seen on his child's face before. It was fear. Pure, primal fear. Oh my God, Marcus breathed. He dropped to his knees, his expensive suit pants hitting the hardwood floor with a thud. What are you doing under there? Neither child moved. They were holding each other so tightly Marcus could see their knuckles white in the shadows. It's okay. It's just me. It's Daddy. He tried to keep his voice calm, gentle, even though his own hands were shaking. Come out. Please. Is she gone? Lily whispered, her voice so small Marcus barely heard it. Ice flooded his veins. Is who gone? Victoria, Ethan said quietly. At 6 years old, his voice shouldn't sound that hollow, that defeated. She went to the store, Marcus said, confusion mixing with his mounting dread. She'll be back soon. But why are you hiding? Did something happen? The twins exchanged a look, a complex, silent communication that sent alarm bells screaming in Marcus's head. They were coordinating. Deciding whether to tell him something. You can tell me anything, he said, crawling halfway under the table to be closer to them. Anything at all. I promise I won't be mad. Lily's lower lip trembled. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. We're not supposed to tell you. Tell me what, sweetheart? She said, Lily's voice broke into a sob. She said if we tell you, we'll make you sad. Like Mommy made you sad when she left. The mention of Sophie hit Marcus like a physical blow. His vision blurred at the edges. What? Ethan pulled his sister closer, his young face set in grim determination. Victoria talks about Mom a lot when you're not here. What does she say? Marcus's voice came out strangled. She says, Ethan took a deep breath, that Mom didn't really love us. Because if she loved us, she wouldn't have left. She says people who really love their kids don't die and leave them alone. The world tilted. Marcus felt the floor beneath him become uncertain, like he was on a ship in a storm. And she says we're bad kids, Lily added, her voice tiny. That's why Mommy left. That's why you're never home. Because we're too difficult. Because we're too much trouble. Marcus couldn't breathe. The words were knives, each one finding a vital organ. She says, Ethan continued, and Marcus could hear the careful way his 6-year-old son was choosing his words, like he'd rehearsed this, that we need to be better. That we need to be quiet and good and not cause problems. Or we'll make you leave too. When we're bad, Lily whispered, she puts us in the closet. What closet? Marcus's voice was barely audible. The one in the hallway upstairs. The dark one with no windows. She makes us sit in there. Sometimes for an hour. Sometimes longer. She says it's where bad children belong until they learn to behave. Ethan nodded. She says Mommy is watching from heaven. And Mommy is disappointed in us because we're not good enough. The dining room, with its expensive chandelier and imported Italian furniture, suddenly felt like a crime scene. Marcus felt something inside him shatter, not break, but shatter into so many pieces he didn't know if it could ever be whole again. His children had been living in a nightmare. In his house. Under his roof. While he was in meetings, closing deals, building an empire. He'd been so focused on providing that he'd failed to protect. He pulled both twins into his arms, their small bodies fitting against his chest. They clung to him with desperate strength, and for the first time since Sophie's funeral, Chen wept. Not silent tears. Not dignified grief. But great, gasping sobs that shook his entire body. "I'm so sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I should have known. I should have seen. We tried to be good," Lily sobbed into his shoulder. "We tried so hard." "You are good," Marcus said fiercely, pulling back to look at both of them. "You are perfect. You are the best children in the entire world. None of this is your fault. Do you hear me? None of it." "But she said," Ethan started. "She lied," Marcus cut him off, his voice hard as steel now. "Everything she told you was a lie. Your mother loved you more than anything in this world. She didn't leave you. She got sick, and the sickness took her away. But she didn't want to go. She wanted to stay with you forever." "Really?" Lily asked, her voice trembling with hope. "Really. And I'm not leaving either. I know I haven't been here enough. I know I've been working too much. But that's going to change. Starting right now." He hugged them again, breathing in the scent of their shampoo, something vanilla and sweet, and felt the full weight of his failure crash down on him. But beneath the grief and guilt, something else was rising. Something cold and sharp and deadly. Rage. Victoria Ashford had tortured his children. Had weaponized their grief. Had used their mother's memory as a tool of psychological abuse. And Chen was going to find out why. Because as he held his trembling children, a terrible realization was forming in his mind: this wasn't random cruelty. The way Victoria had spoken about Sophie, the specific ways she'd manipulated the twins, it all felt too targeted. Too personal. Victoria knew something. Or she wanted something. And Marcus was going to uncover the truth, no matter what it cost him. Marcus carried his children upstairs, settling them in his master bedroom where they could stay close while he made calls. He ordered pizza, their favorite, and turned on a movie they'd watched 100 times. Slowly, the tension in their small bodies began to ease. While they ate, Marcus stepped into the hallway and called his head of security, David Reeves. David had been with Chen Dynamics since the beginning, a former police detective who now handled corporate security and sensitive investigations. "I need you at my house. Now. And bring your wife," Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled fury. David arrived within 30 minutes with his wife, Caroline, a warm kindergarten teacher the twins had met at company events. While Caroline stayed with Lily and Ethan, David followed Marcus to Victoria's quarters, a private suite on the first floor that Marcus had never entered. "We're looking for anything unusual," Marcus said. "Journals, photos, documents. Anything that explains why she's been psychologically torturing my children." They searched methodically. Victoria's room was impeccably organized, clothes hung by color, books alphabetized, surfaces dust-free. But in the bottom drawer of her nightstand, beneath perfectly folded sweaters, David found a locked metal box. Marcus broke the lock without hesitation. Inside was a journal bound in black leather. Marcus opened it with trembling hands, and the first page made his blood run cold. Day 1 at the Chen residence. "The children are undisciplined and spoiled, just as I expected. They have no idea what real loss looks like. They have no appreciation for what they have. This will be corrected." Entry after entry detailed Victoria's methodical psychological manipulation. Lily cried for her mother today. I reminded her that crying is selfish, that her mother chose to leave, and tears won't bring her back. She must learn that weakness is unacceptable. Ethan refused to eat his vegetables. 2 hours in the closet taught him the consequences of disobedience. He's learning. They're beginning to understand that their father's absence is their fault. Good. Guilt is an excellent motivator. But it was the entries near the end that made Marcus's hands shake so violently he almost dropped the journal. 3 years of planning, and I'm finally here. The twins look so much like her it's painful. But they need to understand what their mother did. They need to know the truth about Sophie Chen, about how she destroyed everything. Marcus has no idea who I am. Why would he? I've changed my name, my appearance, everything. But I remember him. I remember them both. And soon, he'll remember me too. At the bottom of the box were photographs. Old photographs from 20 years ago. Marcus's hands froze as he pulled them out. The first photo showed 4 people at a college graduation, Marcus, young and optimistic, wearing his UCLA graduation gown. Sophie, radiant at 22, her art portfolio under her arm. And 2 other people, a young couple Marcus recognized with a jolt of shock. Thomas and Victoria Brennan. Sophie's college roommate and her boyfriend. The second photo was from a wedding. Thomas and Victoria on their wedding day, with Sophie as the maid of honor and Marcus as a groomsman. Marcus hadn't thought about the Brennans in nearly 20 years. They'd all been close in college, inseparable, really. But after graduation, life had pulled them in different directions. Thomas had taken a job in Seattle. They'd lost touch gradually, the way people do. But why was Victoria Brennan working in his home under a fake name? The final item in the box was a yellowed newspaper clipping from 18 years ago. The headline read, "Local man dies in mountain climbing accident." Thomas Brennan, age 24, had fallen to his death while climbing Mount Rainier. The article was brief, clinical. Survived by his wife, Victoria. Beneath the clipping was a handwritten letter, addressed to Sophie but never sent. "Sophie, you killed him. Not with your hands, but with your words. Thomas wouldn't have been on that mountain if you hadn't rejected him. He loved you his entire life, and you chose Marcus instead. You couldn't even see what was right in front of you. Thomas climbed that mountain to prove something, to himself, to you, to anyone who would listen. And he fell. I've spent 18 years alone because of your selfishness. Your children will understand what loss really means. They'll understand what it's like to have someone you love taken away. Just like you took Thomas from me." Marcus felt the world collapse around him. Victoria Brennan had been Sophie's best friend. Thomas had been his fraternity brother. They'd all shared an apartment their senior year at UCLA. And apparently, Thomas had been in love with Sophie. Marcus had never known. Sophie had never mentioned it. But Victoria had known. And she'd spent 18 years festering in grief and rage, blaming Sophie for her husband's death. And when Sophie herself died, Victoria hadn't found closure, she'd found an opportunity for revenge. Against 2 innocent children. The return. Marcus heard the front door open. Victoria's voice called out, "Mr. Chen? I'm back. I picked up groceries." David's hand moved to his belt, where he kept his licensed firearm. But Marcus shook his head. "Let me handle this." He walked to the kitchen where Victoria was unpacking shopping bags, her movements calm and precise. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, that same warm, professional smile she'd shown for 8 months. "Mr. Chen, I didn't expect you home so early. I hope the children told you I just ran to the market. We were out of." Victoria Brennan. She froze. The bag in her hands slipped, oranges rolling across the marble floor. Or should I say Victoria Ashford? Which name do you prefer? Marcus's voice was deceptively calm, but his eyes were molten fury. All color drained from Victoria's face. For a moment, she looked like she might run. Then her expression hardened into something cold and bitter. "So you finally figured it out," she said. "Took you long enough. Why?" Marcus demanded. Why would you torture two innocent children? Innocent? Victoria laughed, a harsh, broken sound. They're Sophie's children. They have her eyes, her smile, her everything. Do you know what it's like to look at them every day and see the woman who destroyed my life? Sophie didn't destroy your life. She didn't even know Thomas had feelings for her. Of course she knew. Victoria's voice rose to a shout. Everyone knew. He wrote her poetry. He stayed up all night helping her with art projects. He would have done anything for her. And she just dismissed him. Chose you instead because you were ambitious and going places. That's not how it happened. Thomas climbed that mountain to prove he was brave enough, strong enough, worthy enough for Sophie Chen. And he fell. He died trying to be someone he wasn't, all because your wife couldn't see what was right in front of her. Marcus stared at this woman he'd welcomed into his home, seeing clearly for the first time the depth of her delusion. You're blaming a dead woman for your husband's choices. Thomas climbed that mountain. Thomas took that risk. Sophie didn't force him to do anything. She could have loved him back. Victoria screamed. She could have chosen him instead of you. He would still be alive if she had just chosen someone she didn't love. Lived a lie to make your husband feel better? Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You tortured my children because you couldn't face the fact that your husband made his own choices. You used their mother's memory as a weapon because you're too broken to accept reality. Victoria's composure shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face. I lost everything. You got to have your perfect life with Sophie. You got the children, the success, everything. Even after she died, you still had something to hold on to. I had nothing. Nothing. So you decided to make sure my children had nothing too? To make them feel worthless and unloved? To lock them in closets and tell them their dead mother didn't care about them? Marcus's voice broke. They're 6 years old, Victoria. They're babies. They needed to understand, Victoria whispered, her voice hollow. They needed to know what real loss feels like. David stepped forward from the doorway. Mrs. Brennan, I'm calling the police. What you've done constitutes child abuse, unlawful imprisonment, and psychological torture of minors. Victoria didn't resist. She simply sank into a chair, her face in her hands. I thought it would make me feel better, she whispered. I thought if they suffered like I suffered, maybe the pain would stop. But it didn't. It just got worse. The reckoning. The police arrived within 20 minutes. Victoria was arrested and charged with multiple counts of child abuse and endangerment. The case made headlines. Nanny's decades-old vendetta leads to child abuse charges. But Marcus didn't care about the publicity. His only focus was on Lily and Ethan. He took a leave of absence from Chen Dynamics, the first time he'd stepped away from the company in 12 years. He hired Dr. Helena Marsh full-time to work with the twins daily. He sold the Riverside Heights mansion, unable to bear the memories of what had happened there, and moved to a smaller, warmer home in the Maplewood district where Sophie had always wanted to live. Most importantly, he was present. He drove them to school every morning. He cooked dinner with them every night, badly at first, then gradually improving. He read them stories before bed, helped with homework, attended every school event. The healing was slow. Lily had nightmares for months. Ethan developed anxiety about being left alone. But Marcus was there for every nightmare, every panic attack, every moment they needed him. During Victoria's trial, Marcus learned the full extent of her obsession. She'd been planning this for 3 years, since Sophie's death, changing her name, building a false identity, obtaining fake references. She'd targeted the Chen family specifically, waiting for the right moment to insert herself into their lives. The judge sentenced her to 8 years in prison, with mandatory psychiatric treatment. On the day of sentencing, Marcus was allowed to give a victim impact statement. He stood before the court, his children seated with Caroline Reeves in the gallery, and spoke. Victoria Brennan tried to destroy my children because she couldn't accept her own pain. She wanted them to suffer the way she suffered. But she failed. Because despite everything she did to them, despite the cruelty and the manipulation, my children are still capable of love. They're still kind. They're still strong. She couldn't break them. And that's not because of me. I failed them by not being present. It's because of who they are. It's because they carry their mother's light inside them, and no amount of darkness can extinguish that. He turned to look at Lily and Ethan. They taught me that healing isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about choosing to love despite the pain. It's about being present for the people who matter. Victoria took 8 months from us. But we have the rest of our lives to be a family. And that's what we're going to do. The resolution. 2 years later, Marcus stood in the backyard of their Maplewood home, watching Lily and Ethan play with the golden retriever puppy they'd adopted, a decision Sophie would have loved. The dog, predictably named Sunny, bounded through fall and autumn leaves while the twins laughed. Chen Dynamics was thriving under a new leadership structure that allowed Marcus to work from home 3 days a week. He discovered he didn't need to be in the office 90 hours a week to be successful. He just needed to be smart about delegation and priorities. The twins were in therapy, but they were thriving. Lily had joined the school art club and was creating paintings that reminded Marcus achingly of Sophie's work. Ethan had developed a love for building things, Legos at first, but now he was talking about becoming an engineer. They talked about Sophie regularly now. Marcus had learned to share stories about her without drowning in grief. The twins knew their mother had loved them fiercely. They knew her death wasn't their fault. They knew she would be proud of who they were becoming. As for Victoria Brennan, Marcus had chosen not to carry hatred for her. Not because she deserved forgiveness, but because he refused to let her poison any more of their lives. She was serving her sentence. The justice system had done its work. His job was different now. His job was to be present. To love his children. To honor Sophie's memory by being the father she'd always believed he could be. Lily ran up to him, leaves tangled in her dark hair. "Daddy, watch this. Watch what Sonny can do." And Marcus watched. Not distracted by his phone. Not thinking about work. Just present. Just there. Because he'd learned the hardest lesson of his life: success means nothing if you're not there to share it with the people you love. And sometimes, the most important thing a parent can do is simply show up. The ghost of Sophie Chen no longer haunted the Chen family. Instead, her love lived on in the resilience of her children, in the lessons Marcus had finally learned, and in the small, beautiful moments of ordinary life. Justice, Marcus had discovered, wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about healing the wounded and choosing to build something better from the ashes of pain. And that's exactly what they did.